My name is Haley. I'm 28 years old, and the night my father slammed his hand against the mahogany table, I knew I wasn't sitting at dinner, I was on trial. He pointed at me and said, I was the shame of this family. My mother didn't hesitate. She stroked my sister Jenna's hair and said only Jenna made them proud. I remember the silence after that. Thick, suffocating. And in that silence, something inside me changed forever. For the past 3 years, I've been living like a ghost in my own home. Not upstairs, where the sunlight pours through wide windows onto marble floors. Not at the long dining table where my parents entertain guests and pretend everything is perfect. No, I exist beneath them. In the renovated basement, low ceiling, faint smell of damp earth and old pipes that never quite goes away, no matter how many scented candles I burn. They think it fits me. In their version of reality, I'm the underachieving daughter with a low-level administrative job at a logistics company, filing paperwork, answering emails, earning just enough to justify my simple wardrobe and the absence of designer labels. No luxury handbags, no diamond studs, no flashy car in the driveway. They look at my modest clothes and see proof of their disappointment. The irony is almost poetic, because while they mock my meager income, I manage investment portfolios worth millions. I am a senior portfolio manager trusted with high-stakes decisions that can generate more in a single trading session than my father brings home in months. I sit in boardrooms with executives who listen when I speak. I move capital across markets with a few calculated clicks. Entire companies adjust their strategies based on analyses I prepare. But at home, I'm the failure in the basement, and that is by design. I learned early on that revealing my true income would not earn me respect. It would simply change my role. I wouldn't become the successful daughter. I would become the permanent solution to every financial inconvenience. The emergency fund, the silent sponsor, the family's private bank. So I made a choice. I downplayed everything. I drove a sensible sedan instead of the car I could easily afford. I wore department store dresses instead of custom tailoring. I nodded quietly when they made comments about my limited prospects. I let them believe I was surviving, not thriving, because I knew the moment they saw my real numbers, they would attach themselves to me like vines, squeezing until nothing was left. Even without knowing the full truth, Jenna already treats my stability like her personal safety net. She spends her days curating a lifestyle she sees on social media. Designer handbags appear at the front door with alarming frequency. Last-minute weekend trips booked without hesitation. Spa memberships, private fitness trainers she abandons after a month. Every purchase wrapped in the confidence of someone who believes consequences are optional. If her credit card balances creep too high, she sighs dramatically at dinner about unexpected expenses. My parents rush to defend her ambition. They frame her spending as investment and image to maintain a network to build. And then the looks begin, subtle at first. Haley, you're so responsible. You've always been the practical one. Your sister just needs a little help until things take off. It's never a request. It's an expectation. A silent assumption that if something collapses, I will be there underneath it, holding the weight. They don't know the full scale of my earnings, but they know enough to sense that I'm stable, dependable, the one who doesn't cause trouble, the one who can be leaned on without complaint. So I endure. I come home late after closing complex deals that require razor-sharp focus. I change out of tailored workwear into something plain before walking upstairs. I listened to Jenna talk about exclusive parties while knowing I've funded more valuable rooms than she's ever stepped into. Sometimes I lie awake in that basement, staring at the faint crack in the ceiling where the floorboards above creak under their footsteps. I can hear them laughing, glasses clinking, plans being made. All of it happening in a house, partially sustained by money they think comes from a modest little job. There's a strange kind of power in being underestimated. They see me as small, manageable, replaceable. What they don't see is the discipline it takes to hold back, to not correct them, not defend myself, not expose the truth every time they diminish me. That restraint is heavier than any insult. I don't hide my success out of shame. I hide it because I understand them. If they ever fully grasped how much I earn, how much I control, they wouldn't congratulate me. They would consume me. And deep down, I think they already sense it. That's why they push, why they mock, why they need to keep me small in their narrative. Because if I ever decided to step out of the basement, literally and figuratively, the entire structure of their comfortable illusion might start to crack. So I stayed quiet for years, not because I believed their words, but because I was waiting. 2 weeks before that dinner, I was ripped out of sleep by violent pounding on my basement door. Not knocking, pounding. I remember staring at the ceiling in the dark, heart racing, thinking for a split second that something had happened to the house. A fire, a break-in, something catastrophic. In a way, I wasn't wrong. When I opened the door, my father was standing there in wrinkled pajamas, his face pale and tight. Get upstairs. Now. No explanation, just command. The living room lights were blazing when I stepped in. It was 3 a.m., but the house looked like it was hosting a crisis summit. My father was pacing in sharp, frantic lines across the rug. My mother stood near the window, clutching her robe closed like she was holding herself together by force. And Jenna was collapsed on the velvet sofa, mascara streaked down her cheeks, the sharp smell of vodka clinging to her clothes. She had taken a turn too fast in a residential neighborhood, lost control, slammed straight into a parked luxury sedan owned by a well-known local doctor. The kind of person whose name circulates at charity galas and country club dinners. The kind of person who doesn't quietly forget something like this. She can't have a record, my mother said immediately, as if I'd accused her of something. Not now. Not before the engagement. My father stopped pacing and faced me. We need $30,000 in cash before sunrise. Not can you help. Not is that possible. Just a number. A deadline. They were terrified. Not about Jenna's safety. Not about the fact that she could have killed someone. They were terrified of paperwork, of headlines, of whispers spreading through their carefully curated social circle. A police report would stain the image they had spent years polishing. I sat down on the armchair and opened my laptop. My hands were steady. My mind was already calculating liquidity transfer limits, settlement timing. I could feel my father standing behind me, checking his watch every few seconds like I was a delayed transaction at a bank counter. How long is this going to take? He snapped. It has to clear, I said quietly. Large transfers trigger security reviews. He exhaled sharply through his nose, annoyed, as if I had personally designed the banking system to inconvenience him. Behind me, Jenna was sobbing loudly, but even through the tears, there was something performative about it. Dramatic. Center stage. I can't let this ruin everything, she kept repeating. Do you know what this will do to me? To her, not to the doctor whose car she destroyed, not to the neighbors she endangered. To her. My mother leaned over the back of the sofa and stroked Jenna's hair like she was comforting a child who had spilled juice instead of someone who had driven drunk. It's going to be fine. Haley's handling it. Haley's handling it. The phrase echoed in my head as the confirmation screen loaded. I authorized the transfer. $30,000 leaving my account in a matter of seconds. 3 years of careful restraint, gone with one click. There, I said, it's done. My father leaned closer, scanning the screen as if he expected me to have made a mistake. When the confirmation number appeared, he straightened slightly. Jenna wiped at her smeared mascara and stood up. For a moment, I thought she might look at me, might say thank you, might acknowledge that I had just erased the immediate consequences of her recklessness. Instead, she let out an irritated sigh. You should have done that faster, she muttered. The stress is giving me a migraine. I stared at her, wondering if I had misheard, but no one corrected her. My father nodded, once as if the crisis had been managed by competent staff. It's your duty as the elder sister to protect this family from scandals caused by youthful mistakes. Duty. That word landed heavier than the money. I wasn't a daughter in that moment. I was infrastructure, a financial firewall shielding them from consequences. No one asked how much of my savings that wiped out. No one wondered what I had been planning for myself. They simply assumed the resource was available because it always had been. I closed the laptop slowly and stood up. Go back to bed, my mother said, dismissively, already turning her attention back to Jenna. We'll handle the rest. Handle the rest? As if I hadn't just handled the only part that truly mattered to them. I walked back down the stairs to the basement, each step heavier than the last. The house above me gradually quieted as the adrenaline wore off. Doors closed, lights clicked off, silence returned. But something inside me didn't. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dim light and opened my banking app again, staring at the empty space where that $30,000 used to sit. And for the first time, I didn't feel sadness. I felt clarity. That transfer wasn't an act of love. It wasn't sacrifice. It wasn't family solidarity. It was a transaction. And as I looked at the number, I realized something with absolute certainty. This wasn't just another bailout. It was the final entry in a ledger I had been keeping in my head for years. And soon I was going to close that account. That Friday evening, the smell of slightly burnt steak drifted through the dining room like a warning. I should have trusted my instincts when I walked upstairs. The table was already set with crystal glasses and polished silverware, my mother hovering over every detail like we were hosting royalty instead of just ourselves. Jenna was glowing in a way that felt theatrical, almost rehearsed. Halfway through dinner, she tapped her crystal wine glass with a fork. The sharp ringing cut through the room. I have an announcement, she said, her eyes sparkling brighter than the diamond on her finger. She lifted her hand slowly, deliberately angling it, so the chandelier light caught the stone. Ethan proposed this afternoon. My father leaned back in his chair as if he personally had secured the engagement. Pride radiated off him. My mother clasped her hands to her chest and gasped dramatically, already talking about venues and guest lists. The engagement party will be next weekend, Jenna continued, barely containing her excitement. At the country club, the exclusive one, where only the wealthiest families have memberships. Of course it would be there. The room buzzed with admiration, compliments, laughter. My father looked from Jenna's beaming face to me, sitting quietly at the end of the table, and his expression shifted. He picked up his steak knife and pointed it in my direction. "Haley," he said, voice thick with smug satisfaction, "look at that ring on your sister's finger. You'll never see anything like it in your entire miserable life." The words landed harder than I expected, even after everything. "You work yourself to death for pennies," he went on, shaking his head, "and you can't even afford the box that ring came in. Maybe you should learn how to live smartly like Jenna instead of wasting your life." Pennies. 2 weeks earlier, I had transferred $30,000 to keep Jenna out of a criminal record. I had covered $50,000 in gambling debts the year before. I had quietly kept mortgage payments from collapsing this very house. Pennies. A surge of heat rose in my chest, and for once, I tried to speak. Without my financial support, my mother cut me off with a sharp wave of her hand, as if brushing away smoke. "Don't you dare bring up those few pathetic dollars and act like you're some kind of savior," she snapped. Her tone was venomous. "When Jenna marries Ethan, she'll bring home a fortune that makes your salary look like pocket change. You'd be lucky if she lets you carry her shoes." Carry her shoes? I looked at Jenna then. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me still expected a flicker of acknowledgement, a quiet thank you, a subtle defense. Instead, she giggled. She took a slow sip of her expensive red wine and tilted her head at me with mock sympathy. "Come on, Mom," she said sweetly. "You can't blame her for being jealous. It must be hard watching me get everything she ever dreamed of." The table erupted into laughter. "Not everyone has the natural elegance to be a trophy wife," Jenna added, smoothing down her dress. "Some people are just destined to be worker bees forever." Worker bee. The phrase echoed in my head as the laughter swelled. I could feel my fingers tightening around the linen napkin in my lap, my knuckles turning white beneath the table. They were celebrating wealth that didn't even exist yet. Hypothetical fortune, imaginary prestige, and they were spitting on the person who had quietly kept their reality intact. I scanned their faces one by one. My father's smug grin, my mother's cold satisfaction, Jenna's triumphant glow. Not a single trace of doubt, not a single hint that maybe, just maybe, they had misjudged me. That's when something inside me shifted. Not a dramatic break, not anger exploding outward, just a quiet realization. No amount of money would ever buy their respect. No sacrifice would ever be enough. I could transfer another $30,000 tomorrow, another $50,000 next month, and they would still see me as the lesser daughter, the basement ghost, the convenient ATM. They weren't misunderstanding me. They were committed to misunderstanding me. The burnt steak tasted like ash in my mouth as I forced myself to swallow. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Their laughter blurred into a distant hum, like I was underwater watching everything happen from below the surface. I had spent years believing that if I endured quietly, if I proved myself useful enough, stable enough, reliable enough, eventually they would see me. But sitting there listening to them compare me to a trophy and a worker insect in the same breath, I understood the truth. I was not a daughter to them. I was contrast, a prop that made Jenna shine brighter. And in that moment, surrounded by family, I felt something colder than anger. I felt alone, completely, utterly. Alone in a room full of people who shared my blood, but not a single ounce of loyalty. 2 days after that dinner, I came home earlier than usual. An important client meeting had been canceled at the last minute, and for once, I didn't have to stay late, polishing projections or answering after-hours emails. I remember thinking how quiet the house might be at that hour. I was wrong. The front door had barely clicked shut behind me when I heard laughter spilling from the living room. Loud, carefree, the kind of laughter people use when they feel completely safe. I slowed my steps as I walked down the hallway. Jenna's voice carried clearly bright and animated. There was another voice, too. Chloe, my best friend's sister, who was apparently now serving as Jenna's maid of honor. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I just hadn't announced myself yet. I was about to pass the decorative partition near the entrance when I heard my name. That's what stopped me. I simply cannot allow that tacky sister of mine to be in the official family photos with Ethan's parents. Jenna said, lowering her voice slightly, but not enough. She'll ruin the entire aesthetic. My chest tightened. I stayed perfectly still behind the partition, barely breathing. Just imagine her standing next to me in one of her cheap department store dresses while I'm in custom silk. Jenna continued, her tone dripping with disgust. It honestly makes me want to vomit. Chloe laughed. Not an uncomfortable laugh, not a hesitant one, a genuine amused laugh. You're totally right, she said casually. She always looks like she just rolled out of bed. She doesn't fit in with Ethan's crowd. Rolled out of bed, didn't fit in. I stared at the wall in front of me, focusing on the pattern in the wallpaper, so I wouldn't feel the sting behind my eyes. Then my mother's voice joined in. She walked into the living room, carrying what sounded like a tray, probably appetizers. I could hear the clink of porcelain as she set it down. You don't need to worry about her ruining your big moment, she said smoothly. I've already come up with a perfect solution. There was a pause. I could almost see Jenna leaning forward eagerly. I'll tell her we're short-staffed in the kitchen. My mother continued. We'll say the head chef needs help washing glasses in the back area. She'll be too busy to come out, and no one will even notice she's missing. For a second, everything inside me went quiet. Jenna clapped her hands together. That's brilliant, Mom, she exclaimed. She's used to manual labor anyway. She won't suspect a thing. Manual labor? Chloe giggled again. Besides, Jenna added her voice, lowering conspiratorially. She's only useful as a walking ATM machine for us. There's no point in letting her stand next to Ethan and lower the value of my party. Walking ATM machine. The words echoed in my ears louder than anything else. Not sister, not family. A TM machine. I felt something strange happen in that moment. I expected anger, tears, the urge to storm into the room and demand an explanation. But instead, a cold numbness spread through me. Slow, steady, almost peaceful. Very carefully, I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. My fingers didn't shake. My breathing didn't change. I simply opened the recording app and pressed the red button. If they were going to speak so freely about my humiliation, I was going to preserve every syllable. They kept talking for 10 more minutes, mocking my clothes, my supposed lack of sophistication, my jealousy. They discussed seating arrangements and photo angles as if I were an inconvenient piece of furniture that needed to be moved out of frame. And I stood there in the shadows listening, not crying, not reacting, recording. Each insult layered over the next until the final illusion shattered completely. It wasn't just that they didn't respect me. It wasn't just that they used my money. They genuinely believed I was beneath them, a servant in their story, a prop, a financial utility. I glanced down at my phone screen to make sure the recording was still running. The timer ticked forward steadily, capturing every laugh, every cruel remark, every smug plan to hide me behind swinging kitchen doors while they toasted to Jenna's perfect future. That was the moment I understood something clearly. Confronting them now would change nothing. They would deny it, twist it, accuse me of being dramatic, oversensitive, jealous. No, this required something else, something precise. I ended the recording quietly and slipped the phone back into my purse. I took one last look at the living room from my hidden position. Jenna lounging like a queen, Chloe nodding in agreement, my mother smiling with satisfaction at her own cleverness. They looked so confident, so certain. I stepped backward, slowly, careful, not to let my heels click against the tile. Instead of walking upstairs, I turned and left through the front door, as silently as I had entered. I didn't slam it. I didn't make a sound. I sat in my car for a long moment afterward, staring at the warm glow of the windows where my family was still laughing about the role they had assigned me. The tears never came. What replaced them was far more dangerous. Resolve. I started the engine knowing I wouldn't confront them, not yet. If they wanted a performance at that engagement party, I would give them one, just not the kind they were expecting. The next morning, while the house above me carried on like nothing had shifted, I drove straight to the private branch of my bank. Not the public one, with long lines and plastic chairs. The quiet one. The kind where they greet you by name and close the glass office door before asking how they can help. I requested an emergency meeting with my account representative and asked for complete records going back 5 years, every transfer, every settlement, every unusual withdrawal tied to my family. She looked at me carefully, sensing the seriousness in my tone, but she didn't ask questions. Within minutes, the high-speed printer behind her desk roared to life. Page after page slid out, warm papers stacked neatly, growing thicker by the second. I watched the pile rise and felt something heavy settle in my chest. Each sheet was a memory I had tried to downplay at the time. Each transaction had once been wrapped in justification. It's temporary. They'll pay it back. Family helps family. Now stripped of emotion and printed in black and white, the numbers told a different story. There it was. The $30,000 transfer labeled as a private settlement the night of the crash. A $50,000 payment covering Jenna's gambling debts the year before. I remembered how she had cried then too. Promised it would never happen again. Mortgage transfers month after month when my father's temporary cash flow issues threatened foreclosure. Credit card bailouts, quiet deposits, emergency wire authorizations. I gathered the entire stack in my hands, and for a moment, it felt like I was holding bricks. Not paper, bricks. $150,000. That was the number when I added everything together that they had never repaid, never even acknowledged properly. I spent 2 hours at the small conference table with a red marker, circling key transactions, drawing lines between dates, highlighting amounts so bold that even the most distracted guest wouldn't miss them. I wasn't building an argument. I was building a timeline. By the time I slid the papers into a structured folder, my hands were steady. My breathing was even. The evidence no longer felt emotional. It felt strategic. But documents alone wouldn't be enough. If they had spent years shrinking me into the tacky basement sister, then the image needed to change too. I pulled out my phone and dialed Elena. We had met months ago through an investment network event. She specialized in high-end custom fashion for women who understood power, women who owned rooms without raising their voices. "I need a fitting," I told her. Immediately. She didn't hesitate. Her private studio smelled faintly of silk and perfume when I stepped inside later that afternoon. Racks of gowns lined the walls like works of art. She studied me for a long moment, as if assessing not just my measurements, but my mood. "Emerald," she said, finally, pulling a bolt of deep green silk from a shelf. "You need something that commands." The gown she selected was custom designed, structured, yet fluid. The silk catching the light in a way that felt almost alive. It fit like it had been waiting for me all along. When I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror, I barely recognized myself. The woman staring back wasn't the quiet figure slipping through side doors and avoiding attention. She looked formidable, polished, controlled, untouchable. For years, I had chosen shapeless dresses and muted tones to avoid provoking Jenna's insecurities. I had made myself smaller to keep the peace. No more. The transformation wasn't vanity. It was alignment. If I was going to speak, I would look like someone worth listening to. My preparation didn't stop with fabric and files. That evening, I drove to the country club where the engagement party was scheduled. The building gleamed under soft exterior lights, its reputation built on exclusivity and discretion. I walked straight past the reception desk and into the administrative wing. Mark, the venue manager, stood up the moment he saw me. He knew exactly who I was, not as Jenna's sister, but as one of the club's most significant silent investors. "I need the main projector connected to my personal laptop," I said evenly, at exactly the designated hour. "It must override any scheduled montage." He blinked once, clearly surprised by the specificity, but he nodded. We spent the next hour reviewing the audiovisual system in detail. I tested the cable connections myself, watched the screen flicker on and off, ensured that when I pressed a remote button, the ballroom display would switch instantly. No lag, no glitches. Every screen, every guest, no escape. As I walked out of the club, my phone buzzed in my hand. A text from my mother. I opened it slowly. "Remember to come early through the back service door," it read. "The head chef is short on kitchen staff. Do not disappoint me." For a moment, I just stared at the words. The audacity, the assumption. She still believed I would slip quietly through the shadows, grateful for scraps of inclusion. I typed back a short reply. "Of course, I'll be there." No sarcasm, no resistance, just calm compliance. I slipped the phone into my purse and walked to my car, the city lights reflecting softly off the windshield. They thought they had written my role. They thought I would enter through the back door, and I would, just not the way they imagined. The country club glittered like a scene from someone else's life. Leaned close to whisper about Jenna's ring. Leaned close to whisper about Jenna's ring, the size of it, the cut of it, the way it flashed beneath the lights. Men in tailored suits clapped Ethan on the back as if he'd just closed the deal of the decade. At the center of it all stood Jenna. She glowed in white satin hand lifted just high enough for everyone to admire the diamond. She laughed too loudly, basking in the orbit of admiration feeding on it. Ethan stood beside her, smiling with the confident pride of a man who believed he had chosen well. The large projector screen behind them cycled through a soft montage of childhood photos. Jenna in ballet recitals, Jenna at graduation, Jenna always in the middle of the frame. And then the room shifted. The double doors opened. Conversation faltered mid-sentence. A glass clinked too sharply against a tray. Heads turned in a slow ripple. Haley stepped inside. The emerald green gown caught the light like it had been waiting for it. The fabric skimmed her figure, elegant and deliberate, her posture tall, unhurried. Her hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. She simply walked forward each step, steady against the polished floor. For a second, no one spoke. Jenna's smile froze. The color drained from her face so subtly, only someone watching closely would see it. Her mother's lips parted in confusion. Her father blinked, as though trying to process whether this was a mistake. Haley didn't look at them. She walked straight toward the stage. The microphone stood waiting beside Ethan. The projector hummed quietly behind them. A soft instrumental tune filled the room until Haley reached the laptop. She turned to the guests. "Good evening," she said, calmly. "I know tonight is about celebrating love and commitment, but I've brought a special gift for my sister." Murmurs stirred. Jenna let out a thin, nervous laugh. "Haley, what are you doing?" Haley's smile didn't falter. "A gift," she repeated. She tapped a key. The screen flickered. The childhood montage vanished. The first slide appeared. A bank transfer receipt. $30,000. The date stamped clearly 3:14 a.m. Gasps spread through the room like a wind passing over grass. "Bail payment," Haley said evenly. "For drunk driving. 3 months ago." Jenna's face went white. Ethan turned slowly toward her. "What?" It was handled. Jenna whispered too low for the microphone, but loud enough in the sudden silence. Haley clicked again. The next slide. $50,000. Gambling debt settlement. Another date. Another transfer. A quiet but sharp intake of breath rippled through the guests. "I paid that too," Haley continued. Her voice never rose. It didn't need to protect the family name, to protect this engagement. Her father stepped forward. "Turn that off. Now." But Haley moved to the side of the laptop, just beyond his reach. The third slide filled the screen. Screenshots of text messages. Jenna's number clearly visible. The room fell into a suffocating stillness as the words became readable. "He trusts me completely. Once we're married, I'll manage everything. His accounts, his investments. He won't even question it." Another message. "Love isn't the point. Control is." Ethan stepped closer to the screen as if proximity might change the letters. "Jenna," his voice cracked. She shook her head frantically. "It's taken out of context. She's twisting." "Explain it," Ethan demanded louder now. "Explain how controlling my money was part of the plan." Her hands trembled. "It was just jokes. Chloe and I joke like that." Haley said nothing. She let the silence stretch. She let Ethan read every word. Let the guests whisper. Let the illusion crumble on its own weight. Her mother looked like she might faint. Her father's jaw clenched so tightly, the muscle jumped in his cheek. Haley reached for the microphone again. "For 5 years," she said, and now there was the faintest edge in her voice. "Not anger, clarity. I've transferred money quietly. Bail, debt, mortgage payments, credit card settlements. Every crisis, every mistake." Another click. The final slide appeared. A single number. $150,000. Bold, unavoidable. That she said is the total cost of silence. Ethan stared at the number like it was a verdict. Jenna's mascara began to streak as tears finally spilled. "You're ruining everything," she hissed. Haley looked at her, not with hatred, not even with triumph, just finality. "I'm closing the account," she said softly. The words hung in the chandelier-lit air. Then she set the microphone back into its stand. The faint thud echoed louder than it should have. Haley stepped down from the stage without rushing, the emerald fabric trailing behind her like a banner reclaimed. The guests parted instinctively, unsure whether they were witnessing scandal or justice. Behind her, the screen still glowed with the number $150,000. And in that glittering room built on appearances, the truth stood brighter than the diamonds. The microphone lay still where she had left it. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the whispers began, soft at first, then sharper. Names, numbers, words like bail and gambling slicing through the room that had, minutes ago, been filled with champagne laughter. Guests leaned toward each other, eyes wide, phones discreetly lowered as if even recording the fallout now felt indecent. Ethan didn't look at Haley, he looked at Jenna, really looked at her. The ring on her finger seemed suddenly too bright, too loud. His hand reached for hers, not tenderly, but deliberately. Jenna tried to pull back. "Ethan, please," she whispered, panic breaking through her composure. He slid the ring off. The tiny metallic sound it made against her skin felt deafening. A collective breath sucked in across the ballroom. "I asked you for honesty," he said, his voice hollow now. "Not a strategy." He placed the ring on the white tablecloth beside the champagne flutes. It rolled slightly before settling abandoned. Jenna's knees buckled. She caught the edge of the table, but it wasn't enough. She collapsed into a chair, mascara streaking shoulders, shaking as her perfect night disintegrated in front of the very people she had hoped to impress. Her mother rushed forward. "Ethan, wait. This is a misunderstanding. She's overwhelmed. Weddings are stressful." But Ethan was already stepping back. Her father moved quickly, urgency replacing pride. "Son, let's talk privately. We can fix this. Fix it." Like it was a transaction, like everything else. Ethan shook his head once. "There's nothing to fix." And then he turned. The doors that had opened for Haley now opened for him. He walked through them without looking back. Jenna let out a broken sound, half sob, half disbelief. Her parents hurried after him. Desperation overtaking dignity. The guests parted again, though this time not out of awe, out of discomfort, out of understanding. When the doors finally closed, the silence that followed felt heavier than the noise before. Her father came back first. His face was red rage, no longer contained behind polite smiles. He strode toward Haley, who still stood near the stage, composed, unshaken. "You've destroyed your sister's life," he spat. "You vindictive, jealous." "Enough," Haley said quietly. Her mother's expression wasn't fury. It was hatred. Cold, focused. "You've always resented her," she said. "This is what you've been waiting for. To humiliate us." Haley held their gaze. For once, she didn't lower her eyes, didn't shrink, didn't apologize. "I didn't destroy anything," she said evenly. "I turned on the lights." The words landed without drama, without trembling. Her father scoffed. "After everything we've done for you," Haley almost smiled. "No," she corrected gently. "After everything I've done for you." Silence. She let it sit there, undeniable. "The ATM named Haley," she continued, her voice calm as still water has stopped working. Her mother flinched as if struck. Her father opened his mouth again, but there was nothing left that carried weight. Not tonight. Not anymore. Haley didn't wait for another accusation. She stepped away from the stage, from the shattered fairy tale decor, from the rings still glinting uselessly on the tablecloth. The doors opened once more. Cool night air rushed in crisp and clean, stripping away the perfume and tension clinging to her skin. She stepped outside, heels clicking against stone, and drew a long, steady breath. For the first time in years, her chest felt light. No more transfers, no more silence, no more shrinking. Behind her, the country club still glowed with chandeliers and whispers. Ahead of her, the night stretched open. And Haley walked into it alone, yes, but finally free. The unraveling didn't take long. Within 30 days, the house was gone. Without Haley's quiet transfers cushioning every missed payment, the mortgage defaulted fast. Notices came in thick envelopes, stamped and official. Her father tried to negotiate, tried to posture, but the numbers no longer bent to his pride. The foreclosure moved forward like a machine that couldn't be reasoned with. They packed in silence. The grand dining table where Haley had once been called the shame of the family was sold. The chandeliers were removed. Designer furniture disappeared piece by piece. In the end, they moved into a small rental on the edge of town, thin walls, narrow driveway. No gate to close against the world. Jenna fared no better. The country club whispers followed her. Invitations stopped. Friends stopped replying. Screenshots of those messages had circulated further than anyone admitted. Ethan's name became something you didn't say around her. He didn't just disappear quietly. Through his attorney, he threatened legal action over the attempted financial manipulation, fraud, misrepresentation, words that carried weight far heavier than gossip. Whether he followed through or not, the warning alone was enough to strip away whatever confidence Jenna had left. Inside the rental house, the atmosphere curdled. Blame bounced from wall to wall. Her father accused Jenna of recklessness. Jenna accused Haley of betrayal. Her mother accused everyone but herself. Arguments flared over unpaid bills, over groceries, over who had ruined what. Without money smoothing over consequences, every flaw was exposed raw and loud. The house became a pressure cooker. Meanwhile, Haley's office remained quiet. Sunlight filtered through tall glass windows, warming the polished desk, where reports lay neatly stacked. Her name, Senior Portfolio Manager, was etched cleanly beside her door. Meetings were focused, decisions were respected. Her phone rang with clients seeking guidance, not demanding rescue. There were no raised voices, no accusations, just clarity. One afternoon, her phone buzzed with a number she knew by heart. She let it ring once, twice. On the third vibration, she answered. Her mother's voice cracked before the first sentence finished. Pride had dissolved into panic. "Haley, please. We're behind on rent. Your father, he can't fix this. Jenna isn't well. We need help. Just a loan. We'll pay you back." Haley listened without interrupting. In the background, she could hear shouting, a door slamming, the life she had stepped out of still spinning in chaos. "I can't," Haley said calmly. "You owe us," her mother insisted, desperation sharpening into old habit. Haley closed her eyes, briefly, not in pain, but in recognition. "No," she replied softly. "I don't." There was a pause, thick with disbelief. Then anger began to rise again, familiar and venomous. Haley ended the call before it could crest. She opened her settings, blocked the number. The silence that followed was clean, not cruel, not vengeful, just final. She leaned back in her chair and looked out at the city skyline. For years she had believed endurance was strength, that sacrifice would earn love, that silence would buy belonging. It hadn't. Self-respect had, boundaries had, truth had, She hadn't needed to scream or scheme or beg. She had simply stopped paying for her own humiliation. And in the end, that had been the only revenge that mattered. I learned that self-respect isn't loud. It's quiet, steady, and sometimes it looks like walking away even from family. Love doesn't require you to shrink to fund your own mistreatment or to stay where you're only valued for what you give. If this story felt familiar, I'd really like to hear your thoughts. And if you want more stories about finding your strength, stay with me. There's more to come.